Hello everybody. That scene that you just saw was a composite that I did of a TIE fighter model flying into a CG Death Star. And this is the first tutorial that I've ever done before. And I'm not going to get in depth into everything because it would take probably well over an hour, and nobody has an hour to watch this. So I'm just going to do most of the highlights, and I'm going to assume that most of you already know quite a bit about After Effects and Cinema 4D. So I just want to show you how to composite a model, a practical model like this TIE fighter, and then put that into a scene with a CG model. And believe me, it's a lot more complex than you would think. It took a lot longer than I wanted it to, because I was learning as I was going along, because I've never done anything like this before. So again, I think that the results were actually pretty good. So now, let's get started. Down here you can see that I added, well, first of all, here is the original green screen scene. And this is the one that I chose. I did many different passes of the TIE fighter, and all I did is put it on a plate glass on a pedestal, which is basically a CD case, and then I just turned it around, and the camera was locked down, and just kind of turned it and did a 180-degree turn to make it look like, you know, eventually it's going to fly in, do its turn, the camera's going to fly around, TIE fighter's going to turn around, go into the Death Star hangar bay. And here's pretty much what I did. I started with the color neutralizer here to get rid of some of the green and bring in a little bit of the red to make the key easier to do. So here it is with the key on. It came out pretty good. There's a lot of fringing on the edges that you can see here. This isn't at full quality. This is at half quality here. It's easier just to show you. So I refined the matte, basically refined the edges, crisped it up, did another key just to fix some of the other areas here. Let's get in a little bit push out here so you can see the whole thing. And you see what exactly is still showing up. I did another edge blur there just to get this even more precise. Remove some color, remove color matting. Enhanced it even more so the edges kind of went in on the mat to make it as crisp as possible so you don't get all this bleed over of the green screen. And I did some feathering here. You can see that I choked it. I did a 3% choke as well. I think that came out pretty good. Now it looks red because I just wanted to focus and highlight more of the reds in the original plate or in the original video, so I could really refine the green, get out as much green as possible. I used the color, a color neutralizer that I used. You know, just went into the shadows, midtones, kind of into the highlights. I think it brought down a lot of green in it, which brought out more of the red. That's okay, because I was able to fix that later, of course. Here's what I did with the key light, what I focused on, the basic color. I tried to key out, shrink and grow the highlights. You can see what I did there. You can see there's a little bit of a green fringing on there, which I needed to shrink and get out. Refine the matte. Try to get out as much as I could of the reflection there on the plate glass to get this as clean as possible, because obviously what I'm going to have to end up doing is put in either roto or do a garbage matte. I just have a blue background just to see what exactly is still showing up in the composite. You can see there's still a lot, particularly on the sides and the bottom there on the glass. And the reflection there was an issue, which I'll explain about here. I had some issues with this composite because I made a decision here to use a plate glass on the bottom to turn it, because I figured it was going to be easier to composite. I think what I should have done is put a green screen, like a poster board or something underneath it, so as it would be easier to composite the TIE fighter from the seam. What I was afraid of is that there's going to be a lot of green spill, and then there was going to be shadows on that, and it would have taken longer to actually composite this thing out and to key it. I didn't want to do roto. I didn't want to use the roto tool, basically. But there was a problem. You can see right here the reflection. It was difficult to tell the difference between the reflection from the TIE fighter model. So where that edge lied, and it would have been almost impossible to roto that out without a lot of issues. There would be a lot of jiggling and wiggling of the edge of the roto tool. So that was an issue with this thing. So eventually what I had to do is go in and just make a mask or mat it out. You know, I'd have to use the mask tool and do a hard edge on the side, you know, of the TIE fighter. I had to be very specific with it and really move that mask frame by frame. So if we go here to the other composition here that has the green screen pre-comp, you can see where we're at here. This is just the basic garbage mask that I use. You can see I had to add a lot of, I had to go to the pen tool and add vertexes. You can see there's a lot left over. You can see the edges here. It was really hard to see what was reflection in the glass and what was the edge of the model. So I did 3 different masks here down the line just to kind of fix some fringing and wiggling there of the pieces of the key that we're going through. And I did a key cleaner and things like that. But here's pretty much what I did, frame by frame. I had to move edges and vertexes as it went from the front of the model, turning to the side. And this is the most difficult part down here because it's very fine-tuned, having to move those vertex points to try to get that to match up with the edge of the model. And there were times I was cutting off the model too much. So I had to go back and fix that. I tell you, I probably went over this about 50, 60 times. I don't really know. You can see all the way down the line, frame by frame. If I had it all over to do again, like I said, I would have used a green poster board underneath and then tried to do the roto tool, or at least do a simple mask. That would have made my life a lot easier. This was probably the most time-consuming part of doing the TIE fighter composite. So you see what happens here. You see how close I ended up getting it and had to readjust it just to show basically what I was cutting off. I added more of a key cleaner there and Minimax just to really shrink in and fine-tune all those edges as much as possible. Matte feather and so forth. And yeah, this is pretty much the mask that I used. I had again the red mask there. I went back into to fine tune even more, and I think eventually after 100 passes, you could say, I finally got it right, and I was very happy with the results. In a perfect world, if you could have a motion tracking camera to go over to do a pass with the stationary model hanging on some sort of a pole like they did in the original Star Wars, or with models, that would have been, the perfect way. So this is pretty much how the composite looks when I was turning, and I'm happy with the results. So let me play this through because I had to build up a preview. And that's the basic move right there. Now on this composite here, let's wait for this to build up. Wait for this to build up. All right. I wanted to test the turning of the model and how that would interact with a test render of the Death Star model, which I did in Cinema 4D Lite, which works with CC After Effects, and I think that went pretty good. and I have to do some tweaking down the line to make it look like it's coming closer to the camera, or there's some, you know, turning on the x-axis and some distortion, you know, as if there was camera distortion and so forth. Now this comp is called tie comp for speed change test, is just something I use down the line. But this is the basic composite of my TIE Fighter. It's very clean looking for the most part. I did a color correction on it just to get rid of a lot of those extra, the extra red. So I brought the blues back in. Again, this is just a .move file. You can see some of that kind of wiggling there of the original, or fringing of the key coming through there. That's okay, because you're not going to see that against the black of the background. So I let that go, and indeed I didn't see it, didn't show up at all. Okay, on to the next part of this. All right, let me backtrack here and go back to these two other pre-comps, just because there's so many pieces of the puzzle here. So, and I'm not working from any kind of script here, so I'm just doing this off the cuff, trying to remember exactly what I did